Hello everyone! In the wake of Starship Mark 1 mishap a few days ago, everyone now looks at Starship Mark 2 and Mark 3 in anticipation. Hope nothing goes wrong with these two spacecraft, which are currently under construction. Before I continue, I need to address the elephant in the room. Starship Mark 1. What happened and why it'll be out of commission permanently. Starship Mark 1 accident, which happened only last week, in essence was expected result of pressure tests SpaceX conducted on Starship. Yes, there are cheaper ways of going about ensuring Starship oxygen tank can withstand certain pressures, and in controlled environment where all data can be collated without extra data pollution and contamination. That being said, SpaceX, to their detriment, found what needed to be done, and subsequent manufacturing changes can be applied to Starship Mark 3, which assembly just started, although still hidden inside Florida SpaceX assembly hangar. Starship Mark 2 could receive some upgrades as a result of lessons learned from Mark 1 blow-up. As Starship Mark 2 is nearing completion, this is the Starship SpaceX will use for actual suborbital flight tests. And this Starship is likely to move to Boca Chica, Texas facility in not too distant future. When could this happen, you might wonder? Personally, I think as early as mid to late January, SpaceX will move Starship Mark 2 to Boca Chica facility for actual suborbital tests, which could now happen as early as mid-February, or more likely in early March. Can SpaceX Starship perform flight tests from Florida test sites, you might wonder? In theory, yes it can, but Florida facility is in built-up area. Federal Aviation Authority, and I'm quite certain of that, would never agree to such tests near highly populated areas, so SpaceX will be forced to move Starship Mark 2 to Boca Chica, where nearest residential area is a small Boca Chica hamlet with 200 residents, some 3.2 kilometers away from the test site. So what is happening with Starship Mark 2 and Mark 3 right now, you might wonder? Well, both Starships are under construction and should be completed for suborbital and orbital tests. Starship Mark 2 is nearing completion. We are talking few weeks. In fact, Starship could be ready for actual flight tests by mid-December. However, I'm quite certain FAA won't agree this test in Florida, so SpaceX should preemptively move the monster rocket to Boca Chica facility without even applying for permission from FAA. Completing Starship Mark 2, on the other hand, will make room for Starship Mark 3, which will go up really fast at SpaceX Florida facility, where Super Heavy Mark 1 is also under construction. SpaceX will also start working on Starship Mark 4 as soon as Mark 3 is up and halfway completed. Coca facility will eventually become the main manufacturing facility for SpaceX, and Boca Chica its test facility. This is until Boca Chica can expand into a large viable spaceport. Construction of second and third landing pad at Boca Chica is underway, and second large hangar will also be built in short space of time. By May 2020, I expect SpaceX will complete much of the work expanding the facility at Boca Chica in time for Mark 3 orbital tests, now likely to happen in May next year. Starship meant for human flight most likely won't be ready before all suborbital and orbital tests are complete. Starship Mark 5, which I expect will be constructed perhaps in late 2020, will be first manned Starship meant for manned spaceflight. By this point, SpaceX will improve Starship sufficiently, work on technical issues, learn from testing Starship Mark 2, Mark 3 and Mark 4. How soon can we expect SpaceX to be ready for manned spaceflight? It's hard to guess, as it will depend on success of previous Starships. However, if all goes well and on schedule, first manned flight by Starship could happen in early 2023. With test pilots flying Starship Mark 5 into suborbit and eventually to 160-kilometer orbit. However, before that even can happen, SpaceX will need to conduct a number of ground and suborbital tests with Starship Mark 2 and orbital tests with Mark 3. Both Starships will be crucial in proving SpaceX is quite serious and capable of delivering on its promise. I know some might ask, why some companies and even US government still have issues of trust with SpaceX? How can that be? Simple answer to that question is, it is not the promises you offer, it is objectives you can deliver. And so far, SpaceX hasn't delivered incredible future Elon Musk envisioned, and critics see any delays in SpaceX's schedule as proof they are right to criticize SpaceX for failing to deliver, which is not only counterproductive but meant to diminish work SpaceX is doing. I, for one, am confident SpaceX can deliver, and if it takes a bit longer, they say better be safe than sorry. So in my book, SpaceX has delivered on its promises. We could argue Elon Musk has a timetable that is somewhat optimistic to say the least, but his zeal and his eagerness and his vision is hard to ignore. Even most skeptical observers must be asking themselves by now, perhaps there is something in that strange fellow Elon Musk. If you like this video, please press like and consider subscribing. Thank you.